What's happening, baseball fanatics, fantasy baseball fans out there? Ryan Thomas of the Thomas Take Sports Podcast bring you another episode. The waiver wire genius, as it states. Ryan Thomas here live on the podcast, bringing you another top 10 countdown. This time for fantasy baseball purposes, of course, for the 2024 season. If you have missed the catchers episode, if you've missed the first baseman episode, if you've missed the second baseman episode, go back to the Thomas Take Sports Podcast YouTube channel. Not only check out those episodes, but subscribe to the channel. Greatly appreciate everybody that has tuned in thus far to this special series, if you will, where I dove into each and every top 10 rated player at every position. By the end of this, we'll have a top 10 for all the positions that I just mentioned, as well as outfielders, shortstops, and more. So definitely tune into that. There'll be plenty more coming up. Obviously, this episode, a big part of the countdown, the top 10 third baseman in the 2024 fantasy baseball season. And of course, in every countdown, I go from number 10 down the list to number 1, working my way down to number 1 as a part of the countdown. Of course, we'll start off with Josh Jung. Of course, if I mispronounce that name, it's a tough name to pronounce. So Josh Jung is the first third baseman on my top 10. And Josh Jung is a young player that obviously is a main focal piece of this Texas Rangers team in the present and in the future. But he will be missing some time with a calf strain that was announced today. Who knows how much time? Reportedly around a 3-week period. 3 weeks is nothing in a baseball season. Obviously, fantasy baseball, a long season. So Josh Jung will be out for a little bit, but realistically, a player that is a big part of the present and future of the reigning undisputed champion Texas Rangers. Number 9, a longtime top 10 member of the third base position, Alex Bregman, one of the big bats in that Houston Astros lineup, and the Astros have been to the ALCS, well, feels like every year for the last 10 years, but it's been the last 6-7 years that the Astros have made it to the American League Championship Series. They've won, or they've played in 4 World Series championships. They've gone 2-2 in the 4 that they've played in since 2017. Big part of what has brought them there, as well, Jose Altuve, who I talked about as my number 1 second baseman. Spoiler alert, number 2 second baseman, actually, in the last podcast. Alex Bregman, a big part of what they do there in Houston. So had to put him on this list as well, Alex Bregman. Number 8, going with a guy that I drafted last year, Nolan Arenado. And Nolan Arenado had a very bad season last year for Nolan Arenado purposes. He was not the Nolan Arenado that we all know and love. There were big struggles, long-lasting struggles that turned themselves around as the season wore on. I don't quite know what to make of those struggles. So I'm not leaving them out of this year's top 10, putting them right within this year's top 10. Of course, Nolan Arenado being number 8. Royce Lewis. This is a sleeper player for me. This is a guy that I'm going to be targeting in a lot of my drafts. I think Royce Lewis, sitting at number 7 right now, could easily be higher, could make that top 5. I really like some of the bats that are in the Minnesota Twins lineup, Royce Lewis being one of them, Byron Buxton permitting his health being another. Royce Lewis can play multiple positions within your fantasy baseball lineup. He can play third, he can play short, he can play a little bit of the outfield too. So definitely a name to circle on your draft sheets come March for your fantasy baseball drafts. Royce Lewis, definitely a name. Could be a 30-30 guy, 30 home run, 30 stolen base player for the Minnesota Twins. Number 6, another bat of the Baltimore Orioles, a team that I've lauded and praised as being one that should be the AL East frontrunner, and for good reason. A major part of that conversation deals with this surplus of prospects that the Orioles have. One that has played in the bigs already, Gunnar Henderson. Number 6 on this top 10 list. Gunnar Henderson waiting in the wings is, of course, Jackson Holliday at short. Gunnar Henderson will be playing on right side alongside him there. At third, one of the best young third baseman prospects that I've seen in quite some time. guy can throw from third to first. The guy can hit. And I expect him to be a superstar in Baltimore for many years to come. Number 5, another name, the likes of Alex Bregman, that has been on this list, and Nolan Arenado as well, that has been on this list for quite some time, that is none other than Manny Machado. And the Padres going through a little bit of an interesting period right now, where the Padres are going through roster changes, lineup changes, defensive alignment changes. The only constant from last year's Padres to this year's Padres is Manny Machado will be playing third base, probably playing a little bit of DH too, here and there just to rest those legs. But Manny Machado, one of the best third basemen in the league, and definitely had to put him on this list. He's always productive. He has his peaks and valleys just like anybody else, but for the most part, you know what the numbers will be. Above 260, above 270 in the batting average department, brings power, brings runs, brings RBIs. So Manny Machado, definitely a name to put as the 5th best third baseman for fantasy baseball. Now, this next name is a breakout competitor, shall I say, a breakout player from last season. Is Elly De La Cruz of the Cincinnati Reds. Nobody electrified quite like Elly De La Cruz last year, whether it was defensively with the glove or with the lumber, laying the lumber to the baseball, of course. Elly De La Cruz was one of my favorite players last season. I only expect his progress to continue. Elly De La Cruz listed as my 4th best third baseman on this list. Number 3, Austin Riley of the Atlanta Braves. I could easily put Austin Riley number 1. I could put my number 2 third baseman number 1. I could put my number 1. Well, you get the point. My number 1 third baseman will be my number 1 for a reason. But Austin Riley is a superstar. And the Atlanta Braves, are one of the best teams in the National League, if not the best on paper. Austin Riley is going to be heavily relied upon to provide the statistics that he has these last few years, in most cases, if not better. And higher expectation, Austin Riley at number 3. Number 2, Rafael Devers of my favorite team, the Boston Red Sox. You could honestly have a gripe with me about putting Devers ahead of Austin Riley, but to me, I think Devers belongs as the top 2 third baseman. One of the best bats in the lineup for the Red Sox on a consistent basis. He's the best bat that the Red Sox have, and he's going to be driving in a lot of runs, barring anything crazy, of expectation-wise. Guys around him hitting well, that's going to be a big part of that. And number 1, of course, Jose Ramirez of the Cleveland Guardians, the guy that took the hometown discount to stay in Cleveland and remain a member of the Guardians. Jose Ramirez, what can I say about Jose Ramirez that hasn't been said already? He's once again not only one of the top third basemen, but one of the top players to draft on Fantasy Football Draft Night. Thank you so much for tuning in to this top 10 countdown of the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. I'm Ryan Thomas. That was my top 10 fantasy baseball third baseman. Good luck on your drafts. Stay tuned for more top 10 countdowns this week.